Kyle's quarters smelled like metal and silence. He had lived in the converted storage unit for 4 years, but he had never decorated it. The walls remained bare except for a monitoring screen that displayed atmospheric data, pressure, oxygen levels, temperature gradients. He checked the numbers each morning with the same methodical precision he had applied to everything since crossing the quarantine line. The routine helped. Wake at 0600, check seals, review notes. Attend the communal meal rotation, observe, document nothing. His research terminal sat in the corner, untouched for months. The transmitter that could reach across the barrier to a cord space gathered dust beneath his narrow sleep platform. He had brought recording equipment, analytical frameworks, probability matrices designed to decode human behavior into transmissible data. He had used none of it. The problem was not technical. His equipment functioned perfectly. The problem was that every time he attempted to formalize an observation about human decision-making, the conclusion evaporated. What seemed like pattern revealed itself as coincidence. What appeared to be logic dissolved into contradiction. They made choices that inverted survival probability. They bonded with incompatible individuals. They sacrificed resources for abstract concepts. They lied to preserve feelings. They told truth to cause pain when lies would have been kinder. The lattice could not predict them because prediction required consistency. Humans seemed to pride themselves on its absence. Kyle rose from his sleep platform and moved through his morning sequence. His body still tracked Tekari circadian rhythms, 32-hour cycles that left him perpetually slightly out of phase with human schedules. He had learned to compensate, forcing himself awake when the colony stirred, accepting the constant low-grade fatigue that came with biological displacement. The communal hub was already crowded when he arrived. Breakfast was synthesized protein and grain paste, served in efficient portions that reflected the colony's perpetual resource constraint. Ganymede had ice and energy, but limited organic material. Every meal was calculated, rationed, recycled. Kyle took his tray and found an empty section of table near the observation windows. Jupiter hung massive in the black sky, its bands churning in patterns the lattice could predict perfectly. Gas dynamics followed rules. Gravitational systems obeyed mathematics. Only humans generated ontological noise. Mind if I sit? Kyle looked up. Senna Okoye stood with her tray, already lowering herself into the seat across from him before he could respond. She did that, asked questions that were not really questions, offered choices that were already decided. Of course, he said, though she was already seated. She smiled slightly, acknowledging the redundancy. Her hair was pulled back in a practical knot, and there were shadows under her eyes that suggested her shift had run long again. She had the kind of face that stored exhaustion visibly, fine lines that deepened with fatigue, skin that showed pallor when she pushed too hard. She was beautiful in a way he had not understood at first. Tekari aesthetics favored symmetry, proportion, mathematical harmony. Senna's features were asymmetrical, her nose slightly crooked from an old injury, her smile higher on one side. But there was something in the way she moved, the efficiency of her gestures, the focused intensity she brought to even small tasks, that his body registered as compelling. He had stopped trying to explain that to himself. "You missed the council session last night," she said, stabbing her protein paste without looking at it. "I was not invited." "You're never invited. People still notice when you don't show up." Kyle considered this. Human social dynamics operated on presence and absence, on the meaning assigned to participation or withdrawal. The lattice would have calculated optimal attendance patterns. He had given up calculating anything. Should I have attended? Probably not. She ate with the quick, distracted efficiency of someone who treated food as fuel. Tensions are high, resource allocations getting tighter. Some people think we should cut your ration. That would be logical. She looked up sharply. You think you should starve? I contribute minimal labor compared to my consumption. From a utility perspective, don't. Her voice carried an edge he had learned to recognize. Not anger, exactly. Something closer to protectiveness. You help with repairs. You've improved our seal efficiency by 18%. Senna argued the numbers in council. Of course I did. She met his eyes directly. Humans did that. held gazes in ways that Takari found invasive. He had acclimated. You're useful, that matters. Only utility. The question surprised him as much as her. He had not intended to probe, but something in her phrasing, the reduction of his presence to function, had created an unexpected discomfort. Her expression shifted, softened. No, not only. The moment extended. Around them, the hub's noise continued. Conversations, the clatter of trays, the hum of life support systems. But between them, silence opened, the kind that carried weight. I need your help today, she said finally. Section 7's primary seal is showing stress fractures. I want to reinforce it before it fails. What time? 1400 maintenance shaft access. He nodded. She rose, taking her half-finished tray. Her hand brushed his shoulder as she passed. Brief contact, possibly accidental, possibly not. His skin registered the pressure, the warmth, long after she had gone. The maintenance shafts ran like veins through the colony's infrastructure. Narrow passages lined with exposed conduit and thermal insulation, barely wide enough for one person, impossible for two to pass without pressing close. The air inside them was always cooler than the habitation zones, and the smell was distinct. Recycled oxygen mixed with lubricant and the faint metallic tang of the dome's exterior skin. Senna was already waiting when he arrived, her work kit spread across the access panel floor. She glanced up as he approached, nodded once, and gestured to the shaft entrance. It's about 40 meters in, the fractures running along the secondary weld line. They entered the shaft single file. Senna led, her movements practiced and economical. Kyle followed, adjusting his pace to match hers. The passage was tight enough that his shoulders brushed the walls. Ahead he could see the flex of her spine as she maneuvered around junction boxes, the muscles shifting beneath her work suit. The fracture was visible even without magnification, a hairline split that ran nearly a meter along the weld seam, the metal showing the kind of stress pattern that preceded catastrophic failure. Senna ran her fingers along it, frowning. Worse than I thought. We'll need to stabilize the whole section. Will the polymer hold? If we layer it right. But I need you close. Like right behind me. I'll weld, you seal immediately after. Can't let it cool too long or the polymer won't bond properly. Kyle positioned himself. The shaft was narrow enough that there was no comfortable distance. His chest pressed against her back, his hands reaching around her to access the seal line. He could feel her breathing, the slight movement of her ribs expanding and contracting. Ready? She asked. Yes. She activated the welding torch. The light flared bright in the confined space, throwing sharp shadows. The smell of hot metal filled the air. She worked with absolute concentration, her hands steady despite the awkward angle. Kyle followed with the applicator, laying down polymer in smooth, even lines. The work required coordination. She would finish a section. He would seal it. She would move on. Their bodies shifted in rhythm, a dance constrained by function. Her hair was coming loose from its tie. He could smell her sweat, sharp and human, mixed with the chemical scent of the sealant. When she twisted to reach a difficult angle, her hip pressed against his thigh. Neither of them moved away. You're good at this, she said, not looking back. You trained me well. You learn fast. Most people take months to get comfortable in the shafts. I had motivation. She paused, torch still active. What motivation? He could have deflected. Should have. Instead, he said, You asked me to help. The silence that followed was different from the easy quiet of focused work. She shut off the torch, turned as much as the narrow space allowed. Her face was close enough that he could see the individual beads of sweat on her temple, the precise brown of her irises. Kyle, we should finish the seal, he said. Her expression flickered, something between disappointment and relief. She turned back to the fracture. Right. Yeah. Let's finish. They completed the work without speaking. The polymer set quickly, forming a flexible barrier that would hold against pressure differentials and thermal stress. When the final section was sealed, Senna ran a diagnostic scanner along the entire length, checking adhesion and structural integrity. Perfect, she said. We make a good team. Yes? They remained there for a moment, neither moving to leave. The shaft was barely a meter wide. Kale was acutely aware of the heat radiating from her skin, the way her breathing had slowed now that the precision work was done, the slight tremor in her hands, that came from sustained tension finally released. "Are you afraid of me?" she asked suddenly. The question caught him off guard. "No." "Then why do you pull back every time we get close?" "I do not." "You do." She turned to face him again, and in the tight space, there was nowhere to retreat. "Every time there's a moment you deflect, change the subject, find an excuse to leave." Kyle's pulse had accelerated. He could feel it in his throat, his wrists. "Senna, I do not understand what you want from me. I want you to stop pretending you don't feel this." "Feel what?" Instead of answering, she kissed him. It was not tentative. Her hand came up to the back of his neck, pulling him down, her mouth warm and insistent against his. Kyle's entire analytical framework shorted out. There was only sensation, the pressure of her lips, the taste of her, slightly bitter from the protein paste, the way her body pressed against his in the cramped space, with nowhere to go but closer. He kissed her back. His hands found her waist, holding on because if he let go, he might fragment completely. This was not Tekari bonding protocol. This was not preceded by compatibility analysis or formal negotiation. This was pure biological imperative, bypassing every civilized constraint. When she finally pulled back, they were both breathing hard. "That," she said, "that's what I want you to stop pretending you don't feel." Kyle could not form words. His entire understanding of himself had just been rewritten in the span of 30 seconds. "We should go," Senna said, though she did not move. "People will wonder." "Yes." They extracted themselves from the shaft with careful, deliberate distance, as if proximity had become dangerous. Back in the main corridor, with other workers passing by, the moment collapsed back into professionalism. Senna gathered her tools. Kale stowed the sealant applicator. "Same time next week?" she asked. "Section 9 needs inspection." "I will be there." She smiled. Small, private, just for him. Then she walked away, and Kyle was left standing in the corridor, his carefully constructed detachment shattered beyond repair. Kyle did not sleep that night. He lay on his sleep platform, staring at the ceiling, replaying the kiss in exhaustive detail. The lattice would have analyzed it. Probability matrices, hormonal cascades, neurological patterns. He had no framework for what it meant. Or perhaps he did. And that was the problem. The Tekari approached pair bonding as contract. Two individuals identified compatible life goals, negotiated terms, formalized the arrangement before physical intimacy. The process took years. It was rational, equitable, designed to minimize conflict and maximize resource efficiency. What he felt for Senna was none of those things. It was irrational. It had emerged without negotiation. It was inefficient in every measurable way. It compromised his research objectivity, created social complications, generated emotional volatility that interfered with clear thinking. And he wanted more of it. He rose at 400, gave up on sleep, and went to the observation deck. The colony's night cycle meant most people were still sleeping. Only a few maintenance workers moved through the corridors, nodding at him without curiosity. The deck was empty. Kale stood at the window watching Jupiter's eternal rotation. Predictable, lawful, comprehensible. Couldn't sleep either. He turned. Senna stood in the doorway, wrapped in a thermal blanket, her hair loose around her shoulders. She looked younger like this, without the armor of her work uniform. "I did not expect to see you here," Kyle said. "I come here sometimes, when things get too loud in my head." She moved to stand beside him, not touching, but close. "It's quiet. Helps me think." "What are you thinking about?" "You." She said it simply, without deflection. "What happens now?" "I do not know." "Me neither." She pulled the blanket tighter. "That's not usually how I operate. I like having a plan. I like knowing the variables." Despite everything, Kyle almost smiled. "You would have been an excellent Tekari." "Probably. But I'm not." She turned to look at him. "And you're not entirely Tekari anymore." "Are you?" The observation was more accurate than she realized. 4 years among humans had changed him. He noticed it in small ways, the way his speech patterns had loosened, absorbing contractions and colloquialisms, the way he no longer found human laughter jarring, the way he had begun to understand the social layers, the unspoken communication, the meaning carried in gesture and proximity. He had stopped being purely observer. Somewhere along the way, he had started participating. The Accord would say I am compromised, he said. Is that what you think? I think I no longer recognize the person who crossed the quarantine line. I think the research I came to conduct has become impossible because I am no longer separate enough to conduct it. I think I have become the variable I was sent to study. Senna was quiet for a moment. Then, do you regret it? No. The honesty surprised him, but it was true. He did not regret the dissolution of his detachment, the failure of his mission, the transformation of his identity. He only regretted that he had not understood sooner what was happening. The Council's going to force a decision soon, Senna said. About you, whether you stay. What will you tell them? That you should stay. That you've earned it. She hesitated. But they'll want proof. They'll want to know you're committed. Kyle understood. The colony operated on visible loyalty, on demonstrated commitment. His presence was tolerated, but tolerance was not acceptance. What would that look like? Destroying your transmitter, formally renouncing the Accord. She paused. Being with me, openly, so everyone knows you're not holding back. Marriage. Eventually, if that's what we both wanted. But even before that, just being together. Kyle processed this. The implications cascaded: social restructuring, identity reformation, permanent severance from everything he had been. The lattice would have calculated the risk factors. He had nothing but the sensation in his chest when he looked at her. I need time, he said. Senna's expression shifted. Not quite disappointment, but something close. How much time? I do not know. She nodded slowly, drew the blanket tighter around her shoulders. Okay. But Kale, don't take too long. The Council meets again in 2 weeks. She did not finish the sentence. She did not need to. The Council meeting happened on a Thursday. Kyle was not invited, but Senna was. She left for it with tension visible in her shoulders, and he waited in his quarters, unable to focus on anything. She returned 2 hours later. They want to meet you, she said, formally, next week, to decide whether you stay. Over the following days, Kyle prepared. He reviewed his contributions to the colony, the seal improvements, the materials analysis, the efficiency calculations. He documented everything meticulously, building a case for his value. But when the meeting came, none of that mattered. The Council gathered in a small conference room. 7 people sat in a rough semicircle, and Kyle stood before them. Elena Martinez, the eldest, spoke first. Dr. Veyron, you've been with us 4 years. Why are you here? I came to study human unpredictability, to decode the patterns the lattice could not process. And I failed. I cannot decode you because I am no longer separate enough to observe objectively. I have become part of what I was sent to analyze. What's keeping you here now? Elena asked. Kale looked at Senna sitting among them. I have connections here, relationships that matter, a life that has become mine. The Accord quarantined us. They decided we were too dangerous to exist among them. Do you understand the bitterness that creates? Yes. Do you share their assessment? Are we a threat? You generate unpredictability. That threatens the lattice's function. But threat implies malice. You have none. You are simply incompatible with systems that demand certainty. And yet you stayed with us. Because I prefer your incompatibility to their certainty. Silence followed. Finally, Eleanor spoke again. If we allow you to stay, we need commitment, full integration. That means destroying any connection to the Accord that could compromise us. The transmitter. She did not say it explicitly, but the meaning was clear. I understand, Kyle said. Are you willing? Yes, I am willing. Then you'll do it. Tomorrow. Publicly. The colony gathered in the communal hub. Kyle stood before them, holding the transmitter's core module, the quantum relay that could send signals across light years. Eleanor stood beside him. Dr. Kale Veyron has requested full citizenship in our colony. By our custom, this requires renunciation of previous allegiance. He looked at the device in his hands. 2 centuries of Tikari identity, encoded in exotic matter and quantum entanglement. He placed the module on the floor, raised his foot, and crushed it. The quantum relay shattered with a sound like breaking glass. Light flared briefly, coherence collapsing, entanglement severing. Then, nothing. Silence filled the hub. Then slowly applause began. Senna was crying. Kyle saw her in the crowd, tears running down her face, smiling. Elena placed her hand on his shoulder. "Welcome home, Kyle." After the ceremony, Senna waited until the crowd dispersed. Then she crossed to him and wrapped her arms around him. Kyle held her, aware of the solidity of her body against his. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For staying, for choosing us, for choosing me." It was not difficult. The alternative was unacceptable. She pulled back enough to look at him. "That's the most romantic thing anyone's ever said to me." That night, they lay together in her quarters for the first time as officially bonded partners. The platform was narrow enough that proximity was unavoidable. Kyle felt her warmth along his entire right side, her head resting in the hollow of his shoulder. "Is this acceptable?" he asked. "More than acceptable." Her hand splayed across his chest. "Your heart's racing." "Yes." "Nervous." "Yes." "Me too." She shifted closer. "But good nervous. The kind that means something matters." Kyle wrapped his arm around her, holding her against him. Outside, Jupiter turned in its eternal pattern. Inside, he felt his old certainty dissolving, replaced by something that had no name in Tekari language. He closed his eyes and let himself drift, Senna's breathing syncing with his, their bodies finding a shared rhythm that required no calculation. The seal in Section 12 failed at 0300. Alarms woke the entire colony, harsh, insistent, designed to penetrate sleep. Kyle jolted awake, Senna already moving, pulling on clothes with practiced speed. "What section?" he asked. 12, major breach." She was out the door before he could respond. Kyle followed. The corridors filled with people, emergency protocols engaging automatically. Pressure doors sealed, isolating the damaged section. But 12 housed 60 people, and they had minutes before decompression became lethal. Senna was already at the emergency command station. Kyle found Haruto and Yuki mobilizing repair equipment. "Can we seal it?" Kyle asked. "Depends on the breach size," Haruto said grimly. The diagnostic data came through. Moderate breach, a seal failure that had propagated along a weld line, creating a 30-centimeter gap. "I need volunteers," Senna called out. "Suited work, high risk. Who's with me?" Kyle stepped forward without thinking. So did Haruto, Yuki, and 3 others. They suited up fast and entered Section 12. The breach was visible, a jagged tear in the dome's skin, stars visible beyond. Air was screaming out into space, temperature plummeting. "Polymer patch," Senna ordered. "Kyle, Haruto, you're on application." They worked against time and physics. The patch had to be perfect, any gap would propagate failure. Kyle's hands were steady despite the adrenaline flooding his system. 20 minutes. The patch held. Senna ran diagnostics. "Pressure stabilizing, we're sealed." Relief rippled through the team. They had bought time. Back in the habitation zones, people emerged from shelters. No casualties. Close, but no losses. Senna pulled Kyle aside once the immediate crisis had passed. Her face was pale, stress evident in every line. "That was too close. But we managed it. This time. Kyle, this is the 3rd major seal failure this month. We're losing the race." Over the following days, the council convened emergency sessions. The failed seal had forced the conversation they had been avoiding. The colony needed a long-term solution, and none existed within their current resources. Eleanor outlined the mathematics with brutal clarity. "If we lose another major section, we don't have enough lifeboats for everyone. We would need to implement selection protocols." Silence followed. Then voices erupted, angry, desperate, refusing to accept the premise. David spoke over them. "We need to face reality. Triage is not murder. It's survival logic." "Whose survival?" someone called out. "Who decides who's expendable?" The argument escalated. Kyle watched Senna across the room. She sat silent, her face carefully neutral, but he could see the tension in her shoulders. That night, she did not come to her quarters. Kyle found her in the observation deck, staring at Jupiter. "They want me to chair the selection committee," she said without preamble. "Make the protocols technically sound. Will you? I don't know. If I refuse, someone else will do it. But if I participate, I become complicit in deciding who lives. You are already complicit. By maintaining the seals, you have been choosing life every day. It is different." Saving everyone possible is not the same as choosing who to abandon. Perhaps not, but the outcome may be identical. She turned to him, her expression raw. How can you be so calm about this? I'm not calm. I'm terrified. But terror does not change the mathematics. These are people, children, families. How do I look at them and say they're not valuable enough to save? You create criteria that maximize survival probability. You remove individual judgment from the equation. That's what the lattice does. That's what your people do. The accusation stung. That is not what I meant. Then what did you mean? I meant that you cannot carry individual responsibility for collective tragedy. If the choice is between saving some or saving none, then saving some is the only ethical option. Senna's eyes filled with tears. I hate this. I hate that you're right. Then do not do it. Refuse. Let someone else bear it. I can't. If it has to be done, it should be done right. She wiped her eyes angrily. I wish you had never come here. I wish I had never met you. The words landed like physical impact. Kyle absorbed them, understanding they came from pain, not conviction. I am sorry, he said quietly. You haven't done anything wrong. You've made everything more complicated. Before you, I could just focus on survival, but you made me want things. A life beyond maintenance. A future that isn't just postponing death. And now that future's being ripped away. Senna, I need to be alone right now. I can't do this tonight. She left. Kyle remained at the observation window, watching Jupiter's implacable rotation, feeling the weight of his presence in her life recalculate from gift to burden. Senna withdrew. Not dramatically. She still worked beside him on repairs, still shared meals, but the intimacy was gone. She no longer came to his quarters, no longer asked him to stay with her. When they touched, it was functional. The warmth had drained away, leaving only professional courtesy. Kyle did not push. He understood she was processing impossible decisions, so he gave her space, even as the absence carved into him. 3 weeks after their argument, the council finalized the triage protocols. Senna had indeed chaired the committee. The criteria were technically sound, skills essential for colony survival, genetic diversity, age and reproductive capacity, health status. The protocols were not made public, but everyone knew they existed. A pall settled over the colony. Quiet, persistent dread. Kale found Senna in the agricultural dome late one night, sitting among the growing beds, dirt under her fingernails. Should you not be sleeping? He asked. Should you? I do not sleep well lately. Neither do I. She looked up at him. I finished the protocols today, submitted them to the council. How do you feel? Empty. Like I've used up something I can't get back. She pulled her knees to her chest. The Accord made this decision already. Decided humanity was too dangerous to save, and now I've done the same thing. That is not the same, isn't it? We're both playing God, choosing who deserves to exist. Kyle sat beside her. The Accord's decision was preventive. Yours is reactive. They acted from fear. You act from necessity. Does the distinction matter to the people I'm condemning? I do not know. Perhaps not. But you are not condemning anyone. You are triaging catastrophic resource scarcity. That feels like rationalization. Perhaps it is, but it is also true. Senna was quiet for a long time. Then, I miss you. The admission caught him off guard. I am here. You're physically here, but we're not together. I pushed you away because I couldn't handle everything at once. You do not pull. You simply stop pushing. It's not that easy. Why not? Because I'm afraid that if I let myself care about you fully, losing you will break me. And I can't afford to break. Too many people depend on me. Kyle understood. She was managing risk, calculating emotional exposure. What if you do not lose me? He asked. What if I do? This colony is failing. You're Tekari. You'll outlive everyone here by a century. You'll watch me age, watch everyone die, and then what? The thought had not occurred to him. She was right. Tekari longevity meant he would almost certainly outlive the colony's human population. Then I will face that when it comes. How can you be so calm? Because the alternative is refusing to bond with you now to avoid grief later, and that grief is already present. Refusing connection does not prevent pain. It only ensures the pain has no accompanying joy. Senna's eyes filled. That's the saddest thing I've ever heard. Perhaps. But it is also true. She reached for his hand. He took it, feeling the calluses on her palms, the slight tremor in her fingers. I don't want to keep pushing you away, she said. Then do not. But I don't know how to let go of the fear. You do not let go. You carry it. But you also choose to live despite carrying it. She leaned against him, and he wrapped his arm around her shoulders. They sat in silence among the growing plants. Will you come back? She asked. To my quarters. To us. Yes. They returned to Senna's quarters. The space felt different now, smaller, more precious. They lay down together without undressing, without pretense of sleep. Just proximity. I'm not fixed, Senna said into the darkness. I'm still afraid. I know. Are you okay with that? Senna, I am so far from okay that the concept has no meaning, but I am here, and that is sufficient. She turned to face him. I love you. I don't know if I've said that, but I do. I love you as well, he said, though I suspect my understanding of the term is incomplete. It doesn't matter. You're here. That's what love is. She kissed him then, and this time neither of them held back. The fear was still present, the grief, the knowledge that their future was measured in finite time. But they chose each other anyway. Their intimacy was slow, tentative, each touch a question and answer. Kyle had no protocols for this, only sensation and trust and the overwhelming reality of Senna's body against his. Afterward, they lay tangled together. Senna traced patterns on his chest, idle, soothing. Thank you, she whispered. For what? For being patient. For not giving up on me. There was never a possibility of giving up. You are the reason I am here. That's a lot of pressure. You can bear it. You bear everything else. Not alone anymore. No, not alone. They slept finally. When Kyle woke, dawn cycle light was filtering through the window, and Senna was still curled against him. He studied her face in the gentle light, the lines that marked years of struggle, the softness that sleep revealed. She would age. She would die, probably long before the natural end of her lifespan, but she was here now, alive, his, and for however long they had, that would be enough. The call came from the council at 0200. Emergency session. All senior personnel required. Kyle woke to find Senna already dressing, her face grim. They arrived to find the chamber packed. Elena Martinez stood at the center, and her expression was unlike anything Kyle had seen before. Hope. We've received a transmission, she said without preamble, from beyond the quarantine barrier. The room went silent. It's from the Accord, a faction within the Presidium that's been challenging the quarantine. They've gained enough political power to force a review. Elena's voice shook. They're proposing to lift the quarantine, conditionally. Chaos erupted. Elena raised her hands for quiet. They want cultural liaisons, people who understand both human and Accord perspectives. People who can help bridge the gap. She paused. They've specifically requested Dr. Kyle Veyron, and any human partners he's bonded with. Every eye in the room turned to Kyle. He sat frozen, unable to process. The Accord did not reverse decisions. The quarantine was absolute. Yet Elena was standing there with proof otherwise. This could be a trap, someone said. We considered that, but the authentication codes are legitimate. This is real. Senna grabbed Kyle's hand. What does this mean? It means, Elena said, that if Kyle agrees, and if he can bring human witnesses who can testify to peaceful integration, we might be able to end the quarantine. Not just for this colony, for all human space. The implications cascaded through Kyle's mind. The Accord would want proof. They would study Senna and him like specimens. Their relationship would become political leverage. But the alternative was watching the colony die. What are they asking of me specifically? He asked. Testimony about your experience here, about whether integration is possible. Elena's expression was unreadable. They want you to return to the Accord and present your findings, with Senna, if she's willing. And if my findings are that humans cannot be predicted, then you tell them that, and we hope they accept it anyway. Kyle looked at Senna. Her face was a war of emotions. Hope, fear, calculation. If we do this and it works, she said slowly, everyone survives. The colony gets resupply, the quarantine ends. Yes? And if it doesn't work? Then we're probably no worse off than we are now. Eleanor nodded. You have 12 hours to decide. They left the council chamber and found an empty observation deck. Jupiter filled the window. What do you think? Senna asked. I think this is the impossible future you wanted. The variable that changes everything. Do you trust it? I trust that the Accord is acting in what they perceive as their own interest. Whether that aligns with ours, I am uncertain. If we go, we might save everyone. But we'll also be giving the Accord exactly what they want. Proof that humans can be studied, understood, controlled. Perhaps. Or we might prove that humans resist control even under observation. Senna was quiet. Then, what do you want to do? What I want is irrelevant. This is larger than us. No, it's not. She turned to face him. If we do this, we're defining our future, what we become. Whether we spend our lives as political pawns or free people. That's personal. He understood. She was asking whether he wanted to return to the Accord. I do not want to go back, he said. The Accord is not my home anymore. You are? But if going back means we get to keep our home, this colony, these people, wouldn't that be worth it? Only if you come with me. Of course I'm coming. We're bondmates. That means we do the terrifying things together. They stood in silence, watching Jupiter. Finally, Cale said, I think we should do it. I think we should testify. Even knowing they'll dissect everything about us? Yes, because the alternative is everyone dying. And I have learned from you that human connection matters more than privacy. Senna leaned against him. When did you become the optimistic one? When you taught me to be human. I didn't teach you that. You did. Every day. In every choice you made to include me, to trust me, to love me despite the impossibility. You taught me that humans refuse to accept limitations as final. They change what seems unchangeable. That's a very generous interpretation of human stubbornness. Perhaps, but it is also true. She turned to kiss him, soft and deliberate. Okay, let's do it. Let's go save everyone. They returned to the council chamber. Elena was waiting. We'll testify, Cale said. Both of us. On the condition that the colony receives immediate humanitarian aid. They've agreed to that. Medical supplies and seal repair materials will be delivered within 48 hours. Then we accept. The council members exhaled collectively, relief so profound it was almost audible. Eleanor shook both their hands. Thank you. You're saving lives. Preparations moved quickly. The Accord vessel sent a shuttle. Kyle and Senna packed what little they needed. Senna included the photograph of her brother. Kyle brought nothing from his old life. That person was gone. The colony gathered to see them off. People lined the corridor. As Kyle passed, they reached out to touch his shoulder, his arm. Acknowledgement, gratitude. Haruto hugged him. Show them what we're made of. I will try. At the shuttle entrance, Elena waited. Ready? She asked. Kyle looked at Senna. She took his hand. Ready. They boarded together. Through the viewport, Cale watched the colony recede, that fragile dome on Jupiter's frozen moon, holding 712 lives he had somehow become responsible for. The shuttle accelerated toward the quarantine barrier. Cale felt Senna's hand tighten in his as they approached the invisible line he had crossed 4 years ago in one direction. Now he was crossing back, but he was not the same person, and he was not alone. The barrier opened. The Accord vessel loomed ahead, vast and geometrically perfect. Whatever happens, Senna whispered, we're together. Yes, that's enough. Yes. The shuttle docked, and Kyle Varen, once Accord researcher, now human by choice, prepared to teach his own civilization the lesson he had learned, that the unpredictable could be trusted, that chaos could be kind, that love was the most essential calculation of all. The Accord vessel was exactly as Kyle remembered. Precise corridors, optimal lighting, air recycled to perfect composition. It should have felt like homecoming. Instead, it felt like visiting a museum of his former life. The Presidium liaison who met them was a Tekari named Soren, younger than Cale by perhaps 50 years. Dr. Varen, the Presidium is eager to hear your testimony. This is Senna Okoye, my bondmate. Soren's expression flickered, surprise, quickly controlled. Tekari did not bond with other species. Of course, the hearing begins in 36 hours. They were escorted to a suite that was comfortable by Accord standards. To Senna's eyes, Kyle suspected it looked sterile. "This is where you're from?" she asked once they were alone. "This is what I was. You don't sound happy about it." "I am not unhappy. I am disconnected, like visiting a place I once lived, but no longer recognize." Over the next 36 hours, they prepared. Zoran provided documentation, questions the Presidium would ask, protocols for testimony. Kyle reviewed them with growing unease. The Presidium wanted data, evidence that humans could be predicted with acceptable accuracy. They wanted Kyle to present research findings he did not have. "I cannot do this," he told Senna the night before the hearing. "Why not?" "Because they want answers I do not possess. They want me to prove humans are predictable, but you are not." "Then don't. Tell them the truth. The truth is that human unpredictability is fundamental to who you are. The Presidium will see that as confirmation of threat." "Maybe. Or maybe they'll see it as something worth preserving." She sat beside him. "You changed. If one Tekari can change after 4 years with humans, maybe the Presidium can change after hearing about it. That is optimistic. I learned from the best." The hearing convened in a chamber designed for deliberation, circular, with the Presidium seated in concentric rings around a central platform. Kyle had attended such hearings in his previous life. Never had he stood at the center. The presiding voice, a Tekari named Velan, initiated proceedings. "Dr. Kale Varen, you crossed the quarantine barrier 4 years ago. Present your findings." Kyle stood on the platform. Senna sat in the observation section, the only human present. "I have no formal findings," Kyle said. Silence. Then murmurs. Valen leaned forward. "You spent 4 years embedded in a human colony. You transmitted no data, and you claim to have no findings." "I have findings, but not quantifiable, not reducible to lattice algorithms." "Then what kind?" Kyle chose his words carefully. "I learned that humans are unpredictable, not because they lack internal logic, but because they operate on multiple simultaneous logic systems that conflict and evolve in real time. The lattice cannot predict them because prediction requires stable premises. Humans refuse stability as a premise. That confirms their threat status. No, it confirms their incompatibility with our systems. The threat is not inherent to them. The threat is that we have built a civilization on the assumption that all intelligence must be predictable to be safe. Humans challenge that assumption." Another Presidium member spoke. "If they cannot be predicted, they cannot be trusted. How do we ensure peaceful coexistence? The same way humans ensure coexistence with each other, through relationship, through trust that is built over time, not calculated in advance. Trust is inefficient, perhaps, but it is also the only mechanism that works with unpredictable agents. You can calculate cooperation with predictable species. With humans, you must earn it." The questioning continued for hours. Finally, Valen asked the question Kyle had been expecting. "You bonded with a human, explain that decision." "I did not decide to bond with Senna. Bonding emerged from proximity, shared labor, accumulating trust, and biological responses neither of us consciously controlled. By the time I recognized what had happened, choice was irrelevant. That violates every Tekari protocol. Yes? Do you regret it?" Kale looked at Senna in the observation section. She met his eyes, and he felt the same pull he had felt in the maintenance shaft 4 years ago. Irrational, undeniable, more real than any calculation. "No, I do not regret it. Bonding with Senna taught me that prediction is not the only valid form of knowledge. Sometimes you must experience without understanding, trust without certainty, choose without being able to calculate outcomes. That is chaos. That is life, at least human life, and perhaps it could be Accord life as well, if we allowed ourselves to learn from them." The chamber erupted. Some argued for continued quarantine, others suggested limited contact. Still others advocated for what Kyle was proposing, genuine integration. The session adjourned for deliberation. Kale and Senna returned to their quarters exhausted. "How did I do?" Kale asked. "Honestly, I have no idea. I couldn't read anyone." "Neither could I." Senna moved to the window. The stars beyond looked different from Accord space, brighter somehow. "What if they say no?" she asked. "Then we tried, and the colony received humanitarian aid. And us? I do not know. Perhaps we stay as permanent liaisons. Perhaps we return to the colony. Perhaps we are sent somewhere else. Would you be okay with that, the uncertainty?" Kyle thought about his old life, predictable, controlled, empty. Then about the last 4 years, chaotic, difficult, full. "Yes," he said, "I would be okay with that." Senna turned from the window and kissed him. "You've come a long way from the researcher who took notes on everything." "I still take notes. I simply do not share them." "What kind of notes?" "Observations. The way you twist your hair when thinking. The specific tone of your voice when you are afraid but pretending confidence. The fact that you sleep on your left side except when worried. That's not research. That's love. I am beginning to think they are not as different as I believed." Night cycle arrived. The Presidium was still deliberating. Kale and Senna lay together in the Accord's perfectly designed sleeping platform, which was less comfortable than Senna's narrow bunk on Ganymede. "Whatever happens tomorrow," Senna said, "I want you to know I'm proud of you. What you said in there, about trust, about choosing without certainty, that took courage. It was simply truth. Truth is courage when speaking it costs something." Kyle held her closer. Outside, the Accord vessel hummed with its usual efficiency, carrying them through space toward a future neither could predict. And for the first time in his 2-century life, Kale was completely at peace with not knowing. The summons came at dawn cycle. The Presidium had reached a decision. Kyle and Senna dressed in silence, the weight of what was coming pressing down. The chamber was packed when they arrived. Velen called the session to order. "Dr. Varen, Senna Okoye, the Presidium has deliberated extensively. The question before us is whether humanity poses an acceptable risk for integration into the Accord." Kyle stood, Senna beside him. He took her hand. "After reviewing your testimony and consulting historical data, we have concluded the following. Humanity is indeed unpredictable by lattice standards. This unpredictability does create systemic risk. However, the word hung in the air. Your personal testimony demonstrates that unpredictability does not preclude cooperation or even bonding across species lines. You represent a proof of concept that Accord citizens can coexist with humans if they adapt their expectations." Kale felt Senna's hand tighten in his. "Therefore, the Presidium has decided to implement a phased integration protocol. The quarantine will be lifted gradually over the next standard year. Human colonies will receive humanitarian aid immediately. Diplomatic channels will be established." Relief flooded through Kyle so intensely he swayed. "However, this decision is conditional. We require ongoing monitoring. To that end, we are establishing a new position, Special Liaison for Human Accord Relations. Dr. Varen, we would like to offer you this position." "What would this position entail?" "You would serve as a bridge between human and Accord cultures, facilitate communication, help both sides navigate differences. You would report directly to the Presidium." "And Senna?" "She would serve as co-liaison representing the human perspective. You would work as a unit." Senna spoke for the first time. "Can we discuss this privately? You have 6 hours to decide." They were escorted back to their quarters. Once alone, Senna turned to Kale. "They're offering us exactly what we wanted. Why don't I feel relieved? Because the position will require us to be constantly on display. Our relationship will be public evidence. We knew that was coming. Knowing intellectually and experiencing practically are different. Do you want to refuse?" Kyle considered. The position would be difficult, invasive, demanding, but it would also allow them to shape how humans and the Accord understood each other. "No," he said, "I do not want to refuse, but I want to know if you are willing. Your sacrifice will be greater than mine. I've been doing that for 4 years. At least now it's official," she smiled. "Kale, I'm terrified, but I'm also hopeful. We could actually make a difference. That matters." "It does. But I need to know you're in this, not out of obligation, because you want this partnership. With me." He took both her hands. "Senna, 4 years ago I crossed the quarantine line to study a problem. I found instead a life. You are that life. If serving as liaison means I can continue being bonded with you, then I accept." Her eyes filled. That's the most Kale answer possible. Completely logical and completely romantic. I am multifaceted. You're unpredictable. The Presidium should be terrified of you. Perhaps they are. Perhaps that is why they want us where they can observe us. Then let's give them something worth observing. They returned to the chamber and accepted the position jointly. Valen outlined the next steps. They would travel to the primary Accord station, establish a formal liaison office, begin coordinating with human colonies. When do we start? Senna asked. Immediately. But first, there is one matter to address. Valen gestured, and Soren approached carrying a small case. By Accord custom, formal positions require formal recognition. Senna Okoye, you have no Accord recognition. I'm okay with that. We are not. If you are to serve as co-liaison, you require formal status. Velen opened the case, revealing what looked like a crystalline badge. This grants you full citizenship in the Accord, with all rights and protections. Senna stared. You're making me a citizen. You are bonded to one of our citizens, you serve in an official capacity, and you have demonstrated capacity for cultural bridge building. You will be the first human granted full Accord citizenship. You establish precedent. The weight of that settled over her. I accept, she said quietly. Thank you. The badge was affixed to her collar. She was officially Accord now, as much as he was. There is one final matter, Valen said. The Ganymede colony has requested your return visit to personally deliver news of the quarantine lifting. We have granted permission. Thank you, Kyle said. They left the chamber together, official Accord liaisons, citizens, partners. In the corridor, Senna stopped. Did that just happen? Yes. We're actually doing this, changing history. We are participating. Many others will also contribute. Stop being modest. We're heroes. We are variables who generated an unpredicted outcome. She laughed, genuine, joyful. Same thing to humans. The next day, they boarded a shuttle back to Ganymede. The journey was faster with Accord technology. Kyle watched through the viewport as Jupiter grew larger. Nervous? Senna asked. Yes. I want to deliver good news well. You'll be fine. They love you. The shuttle docked at Ganymede exactly 48 hours after humanitarian aid had arrived. The colony was transformed. New seal materials stacked in storage, medical supplies distributed, food synthesis equipment upgraded. Elena Martinez met them at the dock. She looked younger, the burden of impossible decisions lifted. Welcome back. It is good to be back. Did you do it? Did they agree? Kale and Senna smiled simultaneously. They agreed. The quarantine is being lifted. Phased integration begins immediately. Eleanor's face crumpled. Then she was hugging them both, crying openly. Other council members rushed over, and the news spread like fire. People emerged from corridors, from workstations, from quarters. They gathered in the dock area. Haruto appeared and lifted Senna off her feet. Yuki wrapped arms around Kyle. Children ran through the crowd, catching the energy. Someone started playing music. Others joined, creating rhythm from maintenance tools, from voiced harmony. It was chaotic, unpredictable, absolutely human. Kyle stood in the center of it, Senna's hand in his, and felt belonging so profound it was almost painful. This was what he had crossed the barrier to study. This capacity for joy in the face of crisis. The party lasted hours. Kyle was asked to speak. I came here to observe you, he said, to decode your unpredictability. I failed at that goal, but I succeeded at something I did not expect. I became one of you. You taught me that chaos can be kind, that illogical choices can be correct, that the unpredictable can be trusted. Thank you for that gift. The applause was deafening. Then Senna was pulling him into the crowd, and they were dancing. Kyle, who had never danced, moving to rhythms he felt rather than calculated. Later, in Senna's old quarters, they lay together on the familiar narrow bunk. This is where it started, she said. You and me. Where I learned to be human. You're still learning. I will always be learning. Humans are infinite. The lattice was wrong about a lot of things. Yes. He turned to face her. Senna, what we are doing, the liaison position, it will be difficult. Constant pressure, scrutiny, demands neither of us can predict. I know. Are you certain you want this? No, but I'm choosing it anyway. Because uncertainty is terrifying but also freedom, and I'd rather be free with you than certain with anyone else. That is very human. Good. Someone has to keep you from being too Takari, and someone must keep you from being too reckless. We balance each other. Yes. They fell asleep there, in the quarters where everything had begun. Tomorrow they would return to Accord Space and begin the real work of building bridges. But tonight they were simply themselves. Together. Home. 6 months later, Kyle stood in the new Cultural Liaison office on Accord Station Prime and felt the weight of transformation. The office occupied a neutral zone, neither purely Accord nor purely human. The architecture blended angular Accord efficiency with human aesthetic unpredictability. Art from both cultures shared walls. The work was exactly as difficult as he had anticipated. Daily they navigated misunderstandings, cultural conflicts. Humans wanted faster integration. The Accord wanted more controls. Both sides were afraid. Kyle and Senna mediated, explained, translated not just language but context, assumption, worldview. It was exhausting, essential. Slowly, incrementally, it was working. Human ships now traveled through formerly quarantined space. Accord vessels visited Earth's system. Trade agreements were being negotiated. The lattice still struggled with human variables, but the Accord was learning to function despite incomplete prediction. Adaptation was possible even for civilizations built on certainty. Senna entered the office carrying data crystals. Latest diplomatic requests. 3 human colonies want formal Accord membership. What do you think? I think they're ready, but the Accord will want guarantees we can't provide. Then we explain again, as many times as necessary. You're patient about this. 4 years with humans taught me patience, he smiled. And stubbornness. The Accord's worst nightmare, a Takari who learned human traits. The Accord's best hope, perhaps. She set down the data crystals and moved to the window. Outside, ships from a dozen species docked and undocked in constant flow. Do you miss it? Senna asked. The simplicity of before, when everything was calculable. No, simple was empty. This is full, even when it's overwhelming. Especially then. He joined her at the window. Senna, I need to tell you something. That sounds ominous. Not ominous. Significant. He paused. I have been corresponding with Takari bioethicists about human-Takari bonding. There are 7 other Takari who have bonded with humans in the past 6 months. If this becomes a pattern, there are questions we must address. What kind of questions? Whether such bonds are stable long-term, whether we should formalize protocols or leave it unstructured. What do you think? I think protocols would be Takari attempting to make human choices predictable again. I think we should let people choose and see what emerges. Even if some bonds fail? Even then, failure is data. Humans understand this. You try, you fail, you learn, you try differently. The Accord fears failure, but perhaps we need to learn from you that failure is acceptable cost of growth. Senna was quiet. Then, you've changed so much. The researcher I met would never have said that. That researcher no longer exists. You replaced him with someone better. We replaced him. Together. Yes. She moved into his arms, and they stood watching ships arrive and depart, carrying hope between worlds that had been separated for too long. I have news too, Senna said. The Ganymede colony wants to establish the first Human Accord Joint Governance Council. They've asked if we would help design it. Of course, what are they proposing? Hybrid model. Human and Accord representatives. Equal voice. Decisions made by consensus rather than calculation. The Accord will resist that. I know. But if any colony can prove it works, Ganymede can. Kyle considered. A governance model that did not rely on prediction, that operated on negotiation and trust. It would be experimental. Risky. Let us propose it, he said, not as requirement. As pilot program. You're learning politics. I am learning that change requires invitation, not imposition. Another human lesson. That evening, they returned to their quarters, larger than Senna's Ganymede space, but still modest. They had personalized it. Senna's photographs, Kyle's collected data crystals, hybrid furniture they had selected together. It was not Takari, not human, theirs. Senna cooked dinner, Actual food, not synthesized paste. She made something with vegetables and spices, filling the space with scents that were purely human. Kyle watched her work. She moved with practiced efficiency, but there was also joy in it. "What?" she asked, catching him staring. "I am observing." "Still taking notes?" "Always." "What are you noting?" "That you hum while cooking. That you taste the food before adding salt. That you smile when ingredients combine well. That cooking makes you happy in a way that has nothing to do with utility. That's very detailed observation. I have 4 years of practice." She crossed to kiss him, tasting of the spices she had been testing. "I'm glad you're still observing. Means you're still interested." "I will always be interested. You are infinite variable. I could study you for another 2 centuries and not exhaust the complexity." "That's romantic and slightly clinical." "I am both. You made me that way." They ate dinner together, discussing the day's work, the upcoming proposals, the small victories and frustrations. It was domestic, mundane, exactly what Kyle had not known he needed. After, they moved to the window. Their quarters had a view of open space. The view changed as the station rotated, presenting new perspectives constantly. "Do you think we're doing enough?" Senna asked. "We are doing what we can. The rest is not in our control." "Very zen of you. Very human of me. I learned from the best." She leaned against him. Outside, a human transport ship docked. New arrivals, probably cultural exchange participants. Each one a small step toward the integration neither species had thought possible. "Kyle?" "Yes?" "If you could go back to before you crossed the barrier, knowing everything that would happen, would you still do it?" He did not need to consider. "Yes. Every choice. Every consequence it led here. To you, to this life. I would not change any of it. Even the hard parts? Especially the hard parts. They made me who I am. Who are you?" "I am between. Not fully Takari. Not human. Something new. Something unpredictable. Something the lattice could never have calculated." "You're beautiful." "That is illogical. I am mathematically average for Takari physiology." "I didn't say objectively beautiful. I said beautiful. To me. Because of who you are." Kyle understood. Beauty as subjective experience rather than measurable attribute. Another human concept that made no sense until it made perfect sense. "You are beautiful to me as well." Then the Accord is wrong about that too. Perhaps. Or perhaps there are multiple valid frameworks for perceiving beauty, as there are for everything else. Look at you, cultural relativist. The old Kyle would be horrified. The old Kyle was horrified by everything about humans. That was his limitation, not yours. They remained at the window as the station rotated through its cycle, presenting new stars, new possibilities. Somewhere out there, the Ganymede colony was implementing improvements. Somewhere, human and Accord diplomats were negotiating. Somewhere, species who had never imagined coexistence were learning to share space. All of it imperfect. All of it unpredictable. All of it possible because 2 people had chosen each other, despite every logical reason not to. "We should sleep," Senna said eventually. "Big presentation tomorrow." "What will we recommend?" "Faster integration, more risk, more trust." "They will resist." "Let them. We'll present the data anyway." Kyle smiled. "You have made me reckless." "Good. You've made me patient." "We balance." They prepared for sleep with the routine they had developed. Shared bathroom protocols, temperature negotiations, the careful dance of 2 bodies learning to occupy one space. In bed, Senna settled against him with the ease of practice. Her head rested in its familiar place on his shoulder. "Kyle?" "Yes?" "Thank you." "For what?" "For crossing the barrier. For staying. For choosing this life with me. Thank you for teaching me it was possible. We taught each other." "Yes." Sleep came slowly. Kyle lay awake, feeling Senna's breathing synchronize with his, listening to the station's ambient sounds. This was home now. Not a location, not a species, not a predictable set of circumstances. Just this. Senna's warmth, the work they did together, the future they were building one impossible choice at a time. The lattice had been right about one thing. Humans generated ontological noise. They disrupted prediction. They created chaos in carefully ordered systems. But chaos, Kale had learned, was just another word for possibility. And possibility, unpredictable and uncontrolled, was the most valuable variable of all. He closed his eyes and let himself drift into sleep, surrounded by uncertainty, held by love, completely at peace with not knowing what tomorrow would bring. Because tomorrow would come regardless, and he would face it the way he had learned to face everything, with Senna, together, between worlds, between certainties, between calculations and hope. In the space where the unpredictable became inevitable, where fear transformed into trust, where a Takari researcher and a human engineer proved that the impossible was simply the possible waiting to be chosen. The lattice could never have predicted them. That was exactly the point.